we had cyclones and many more such kind of instances, which also makes us so very important and very need to prioritize that how climate crisis needs to be given due attention. And also we really need to go beyond denial, because one of the experience which I came across when we had forest fire in our area, the place where I come from, in this February, again people are kind of denying that this forest fire is happening because of climate crisis. Rather, there were so many reports that how the temperature has risen and how it is one of the major causes about forest major cause of forest fire is the rise in temperature. But again, people have the tendency to victimize the indigenous and local communities, that they are the ones who are setting fire. So I think it is very important that the climate action discourse and the biodiversity discourse needs to go beyond victimizing indigenous and local communities and make them leaders of conservation and make them an integral part of decision making process of climate action. And that is what I look up to when we are moving in this decade of climate action, and also upcoming COP26 and Stockholm +50. So I think it would be very, very crucial for all of us to emphasize on meaningful leadership of young people. And the second thing is that COVID has also exposed or have shown the deep rooted inequalities and the social economic justice which is required at this moment. And also, like, how the entire health system and climate crisis is so intertwined, and COVID-19 recovery efforts cannot be done in isolation. Rather, it has to be a comprehensive going ahead, taking into the healthcare system and also the climate crisis, because healthcare crisis and COVID-19 crisis and climate emergency is all intertwined, making all vulnerable, and it goes in a vicious circle. So that is acknowledging that would be really important. And the third thing is very important, is to ensure that there is intersectionality when we are talking about sharing of perspectives or bringing different stakeholders into the policy making and framing, because indigenous communities and local communities, and specifically young people, those who are bearing the brunt of climate crisis, are also imposed with lots of policies and decisions. And this is a good solution for you, but we are solution, we need to be part of the solution, and that needs to be prioritized when we are taking this ahead and this conversation ahead. So at the end, I would like to emphasize that yes, young people are doing amazing work and have been contributing immensely, but I would like to re-emphasize that young people are not safe. It is very important that young people are protected, and safeguard mechanism needs to be there to protect the young people, ensuring that there is safe and enabling spaces for young people. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Archana. Yes, I agree with you that we need more nature-based solution, and we need to preserve indigenous knowledge along with the development. And thank you for all your remarks and your kind words. Now there's a little announcement to make, that we have been informed that Your Excellency Ambassador had mentioned that she needs to leave this event sooner. First of all, on behalf of the constituency, I would like to thank her for joining the event with a busy schedule and highlighting some of the most important things about Stockholm+50 that we should all be aware of. Before she departs, I'd like to take this honor to call her again and give some conclusion remarks. So Ambassador, you heard from youth constituencies and our partners. So what a reflection, and what do you have message for youths like us all over the world?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Can I just ask, because I find this really, really interesting. I know you have more speakers. Is it possibility to have one more speaker and then I can come in?
Yeah, okay, sure.
Sorry,
that would be great.
but thank you for being very kind to me. But I really would like to listen to one more speaker and then I'll come in.
Yeah, sure. We are all honored. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
So moving on, I'd like to thank, first of all, I'd like to thank Ambassador for staying So moving on, we'd like to move our turn to our counterparts from the youth constituency of UNFCCC Yongo. We have with us Ms. Sahir Beg from Pakistan, who is a member of the global coordination team of Yongo. So Sahir, we all know that you are an amazing advocate. You have talked several times about youth engagement and youth leadership. So please share us, how do you see that being in practice in Stockholm+50? And also tell us how you see work being done by Yongo, especially on NDCs and COI 16 fit to Stockholm+50. Please take the floor.
Thank you so much, Rubina. Before I start my intervention, I would really wholeheartedly thank Madam Ambassador to actually show the whole world that, okay, young people actually need this attention. And thanks so much for listening to us and taking the time out from your busy schedule to listen to one more speaker. Thank you. But just as my fellow young leads have been saying, Arshana and Safa, we really need to highlight the intersection or the interlinkages that we have between the COVID-19 pandemic, between the climate crisis, and between other global crises that we are facing. Every single crisis have to be dealt with the same importance, I believe, and especially now when we are building back better or planning to build back better. After the global 19 pandemic, we cannot oversee the fact that the health crisis have brought up the major production and consumption of waste materials and production and consumption crisis with that, which also triggered the climate crisis even more. So don't want to get into more details on that because I really want to take my limited time that I have focusing on meaningful youth leadership and how that should be highlighted, moving on to Stockholm+50. So when the world leaders actually met in 1972 to talk for the very first time about the human impact on environment, I believe that things were different. Things were different because people were focusing on pollution. Things were different because people, the world leaders were making policies with context of their future in a way in the next 50 years. I do not know how much of a freedom or perspective and how much empowered the young people were as they are right now with the digital technologies and with the knowledge and with the will of the young people that are increasing more and more with the increasing severity of the climate crisis. So I believe that this is an opportunity for us to address not only the meaningful youth participation, but also meaningful youth leadership. This is what I believe we are really looking forward to see in Stockholm+50, because now the young people are here, and in the next 50 years, the world leaders that we have right now would be our role models from the past, and we will be the future leaders who will lead the way for the next generations. So I believe what we really need to see right now is an inclusion of youth and children voices and youth and children's perspective in the climate and environmental policies. And I really want to see how moving forward we can include those youth and children voices in the negotiation processes or the outcome paper, or however the process is going to be of Stockholm+50. So this is my first ever hope that I'm looking forward to. My second hope is, of course, as Yango is the official children youth constituency of the United Nations Framework Convention on Climate Change, which is also referred to as UNFCCC. We have been organizing the conferences of youth since 16 years now. And this is something that happens every year before the Conference of Parties. This year, we're also organizing the virtual Conference of Youth. And why is that of great importance? And why is that a huge example to the world leader from the young community is because we really want to make the negotiation processes inclusive of the young people from the vulnerable, marginalized, and indigenous communities. And we do recognize that not every single young person has the resources and has the capacity to travel the whole way around the world to actually have their say in the negotiation processes. So with making these virtual contingencies, we're actually making the negotiation processes more accessible to the what is it called, to the young people and children, right? I mean, I cannot emphasize enough on one of the sentence that Archana just said, and which was that we really want to be a part of the change, and we are actually we are actually the part of the process, and we are the change that we want to see. This is the attitude that we actually need from the young people of today. We really don't want to be seen as the part of the process. We really don't want to be seen just as part of the change, but we really want to be seen as the change itself, which was not there in 1972 and which is there now. The young people know what they want, and the young people know how well the intergenerational diversity is super important. I really respect that. But inclusion of youth leaders and inclusion of youth voices is also very crucial now that the climate crisis is just staring us in the face. So I mean, I cannot actually emphasize enough on the fact that as we are moving forward, the global leaders should be focusing on meaningful youth leadership, very much more than meaningful youth participation, because the young people can do beyond the consultation processes as well. And they are showing every day that innovation is the key. And the young people did not surrender to the global pandemic crisis when COP26 got cancelled, when every single major climate dialogues got cancelled. The young people actually gave the world the virtual contingencies of the major climate dialogues. And I mean, we have a lot of examples if I start to name them. And within Youngo ourselves, we're also working on virtual conference of youth, just as I mentioned. And about the NDCs, we at Youngo are also working very closely with some UN agencies and with some organizations, especially, for example, the climate delegation of Germany, where we are trying to reach out to the major emitters, and where we are actually trying to we're trying to urge them to submit like more ambitious NDC plan if they have already submitted it. One, which is more inclusive of the young people and children voices, and which is more inclusive of the future generations in a way, and which is actually not just, we really do not need another conference where the world leaders come along and they just talk and then everybody goes home. We really do not need one more conference of that sort. What we need right now after the global pandemic is a setting where we come together, the world leaders and the youth leaders, highlighting the next steps, the possible solutions, and achieving them within the next 50 years, for example. But the next 50 years, I just really hope that things will be a lot better. But I think that I'm being super ambitious when I say that, because things won't get better if we won't include, if our climate and environmental policies wouldn't be inclusive of the youth voices. So I believe that these are some of the elements that I would really want to highlight. And as we are moving towards COP26, and Youngo is organizing its 16th Conference of Youth, which will be held in Glasgow, I'm also looking very much forward to having an outcome document which is inclusive of all young people, which is inclusive of also the children and young people from the vulnerable and marginalized communities, which is not just limited to people who attended the conference, which is not limited to people of privilege, which is inclusive of every single young person around the world, because the climate crisis is not affecting any specific class. The climate crisis is affecting everyone, and it's not going to stop anytime sooner. So I believe that these are the few things that I would want to highlight. And I mean, having fellow colleagues from all the youth constituencies here, I'm super happy to see that we are all trying to achieve one great goal. And I'm so happy to see that we as the young people are trying to set up major examples for the future generations as well to come. So these are the few remarks that I have to give, but looking very much forward to Stockholm+50. Thanks.
Thank you, Ms. Sahil. Highlighting of what she said, yes, we are the change. We don't want to be part of the process anymore. We want to become a change. So if the ambassador agrees, I want to have one more speaker before she departs. Is it all right? I want to have one more speaker.
Yeah, I have, sorry, I have another meeting that I have postponed and they are waiting for me. But if it's short, I'm happy to listen, but then I really have to go within 5 minutes. And if I could just have 3 words in the end, that's good. Thank you.
Yeah, okay. I'm just calling him for short remarks. Now I'd like to call upon Mr. Lange Sheru. He is a founder of youth-led organization Alliance for Future Generation and also serves as youth vice chair in the UN Food System Summit Action Track 3 together with member states. Lange, we want you to focus on 2 things. What does Stockholm+50 actually mean to people in Pacific region? And how do you see the vice chairing model in the Food System Summit as an example of youth engagement? Please limit your yes.
So much,
yeah, please limit it to
unfortunately
3 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yes, I'm keeping it short. Thank you so much. And I guess many of the past speakers have really covered a lot. For the Pacific, I believe that for young people across the Pacific, Stockholm +50 is a stark reminder that 50 years after, the first environment conference, that our governments, specifically from industrialized first world developed nations, are still far from delivering their commitments. Because despite the little steps that have been made over the last few decades, the Pacific region is experiencing firsthand the worst impacts of ecological, ocean, biodiversity loss, and the climate crisis, with threats to food, water, health security, threatening stable democracies in the region, and also peace and security. I believe that Stockholm should be a time to hold these governments accountable to current and future generations. No more beautiful, flowery packaged speeches and more action. That's really what we want to see. Move away from coal and fossil fuels and extraction, and create green economy jobs and increase support to frontline economies, including financing loss and damage for frontline communities. With respect to the role to vice chairing the UN Food System Summit Track 3, give this as a critical step forward to the inclusion of youth leaders and youth meaningful participation and voices to contribute to the outcomes of the summit. It is further enhanced through inclusive participation, and we need more youth, to see more youth in these spaces, and it's the responsibility of those who take up these youth leadership positions to open the door for others to also come in. It's important to also receive the kind of support and resources to be able to see effective from youth leaders. I just want to close off by saying that, young people are the most progressive generation in the history till today. And, if we stand up and get involved in political and decision-making process, we can really transform our society, our social and ecological and economic justice, and a good life for all within the planetary boundaries. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lange, for your kind words, for your remarks, and for keeping it short. Now I'd like to welcome the ambassador again for our final remarks.
Thank you so much.
For that, let's take a picture.
Thank you so much, and thanks to all of the speakers, and my sincere apologies to those that I don't have the opportunity to stay and listen to. But as I said, my colleagues is here and listening very closely. I was listening to Josefa when she spoke in the beginning, and she somehow said 3 things to me that brought our challenges together. It was, we have to change the trajectory we are on because that will not lead us to the future we want. She emphasized the transformative power of education. And this is something that at least I hear over and over again in conversations with the youth. And something I have to say that is less present, at least in the meetings that I have participated in within the UNFCCC process and other processes. So the power of education comes always up. And she also used the power, we have the power to lead our own initiatives. And I think this is something that we also very much will take with us. And Arshana was very much, I think, emphasizing the local community, indigenous people. I heard your previous speech also where you were talking about green jobs and livelihood. And being really part of the solutions. This is also something that I think we will bring with us. And in the last, I think, 2 interventions of stressing full the interlinkages. We can't, solve one crisis at the time. We really need to look at these together. And I'm actually quite, I feel, I don't know, reinvigorated and having a little bit more energy coming out of this this hour, because I heard also you using a lot of the same words as we have done in our thinking of After Stockholm+50 of the importance of interlinkages and looking at that. And I think on the last intervention, there was a very, I think, clear message on moving away from speeches and basically walking the talk. So this is also something, a strong focus on action, 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 moving from meaningful youth participation to meaningful youth leadership. And also, I think you talked about, many of you also brought up in different ways, innovation. So as I said in the beginning, we are, in shaping of the process towards Stockholm+50, both when it comes to process and substance. But for me, this has been an incredibly important and interesting hour. And I think we as Secretariat for Stockholm+50 really got a lot of good ideas, some hard pressure and expectations that we will try to manage and that we will try to work on. And I hope also that we can maybe on an individual basis come back to some of you for continuing the dialogue also. So thank you again for inviting me. It has been extremely interesting, and looking forward to speak to you again in this setting or a different setting. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ambassador. We are looking really forward to working with you and your team. And like she said, the team of Stockholm+50 will be here with us for the rest of the session, actively hearing the voices and perspective here. I'd like to thank you again for joining in.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now moving on with the event. I'd like to pass on the moderation to Rahul Prasad for the rest of the event.
Hello guys, are you able to hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so moving on, my name is Rahul and I'm from Fiji, and I always work alone with this youth advocacy and climate change, and climate change and adaptation and impacts. And as you know, that Pacific is going through a lot in terms of climate change impacts, and we have always highlighted a lot in terms of speech, very comprehensive speech, but what we lack is the action that we take. And I think that's where the gap filling can be taken by the youths, who can always come in and make a powerful impact and implement those adaptation and mitigation measures in terms of allowing food security projects to make impact in the society, and as well as to improve the the healthcare system itself. Okay, moving on, we have Chef Sharifa Nuriza from Malaysia, and she is one of the individuals that work for Asian Committee for Youth Cooperation, and she also has served as a regional coordinator for Asia Pacific in the major group for children and youth. And having said that, she has been, engaging a lot in Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, and we would love to hear from her uh, that what are some of the key messages that she has, had from the Asian youths, and what are some of the challenges and the ways in which we can always, provide solutions.
Uh, Thank you, Mr. Rahul, for moderating this session. Good day to all distinguished guests, organizing team, and all participants. Peace be upon you. Thank you for giving me this opportunity to share my remarks on behalf of the Asia Pacific Caucus under the MDCY and also the Asia Pacific Youth Constituency for this session. Excellencies, youth advocates, and also youth partners. I know this is evening session for everyone, but I hope that everyone still have time to listen to my remarks. Okay, for the previous ECOSOC Youth Forum under the Asia Pacific Record Session and also the Asia Pacific Forum on Sustainable Development, APFSD, we realized the same issues raised and highlighted, which is on inclusive investment on youth, meaningful youth-led solutions in all processes, and also the importance of partnership to build back better. With diverse challenges and barriers faced by many countries due to the pandemic, we assert that the need of inclusive investment in the youth-led activities are very, very important. The COVID-19 pandemic has reminded us the need to be more stronger and more accountable in terms of governance. Now more than ever, every human has a right to social and economic protection of their human rights, especially regardless of their migratory status. We realize the importance of commitment and engagement through young leaders' collective initiative that promote local development, regionalism, and global citizenship at all levels are very important too. Young people in the Asia and the Pacific region in all their diversity are at the forefront of sustainable response, accelerated transformation, and bold action during the recent pandemic and beyond. Where barriers exist, young people are creating informal structures, expressing their solidarity while taking their SDG action into their own hands. However, partnership with and also spaces for youth to engage are often unaccounted for, and their action are less recognized. Without young people, the decade of action will not yield sufficient results. For a resilient and sustainable future, we have to commit to more inclusive investment in creating diverse spaces for youth, especially those who are left furthest behind, to volunteer in youth-led sustainable local action for the SDGs. Therefore, youth centers, youth councils, and other self-organized platforms can foster this sought knowledge transfer to support the 2030 agenda in the region. More recognition for youth-led innovations will promote a culture of solidarity, partnerships, and also can reach actions in communities. The diversity that we have in the Asia Pacific region allows us to address our unique strength for more collective action. In relate to climate, peace, and security, we believe that we need more concrete institutional and financial support to empower local actors for peace and security, and also the need to acknowledge the positive contribution from young peace builders and also young environmental defender from the ground. At this point of the decade of action, we strongly reject any threat to democracy, any threat to the existence of violence, and also the environmental injustice, which is still happening around the region and around the globe. As we know, the impact of the environmental degradation can lead to the climate change, which then potentially can impact the peace and security aspect in the community. Climate risks are seen as sometimes as context specific, and their impacts are diverse across the population groups. And the risks of that are higher where institutions and communities lack in the coping capacities and lacking in the adaptation to additional stress or to adapt to the climate changing world. So it need an integrated approach to address that, and also the analysis to evaluate the impact of it to the young people, men and women, as it is raised differently. So we call upon you and everyone to act for the nature and act for the youth. And do not wait for another 50 to 75 years to solve the existing crisis that we have today. For the challenges that we faces in the Asia and Pacific region, from the various spaces that we involved as the Asia Pacific youth, we agree that the diversity of the region allows us to act collectively. We definitely cannot work in silo. We cannot work in silo, and we need more solidarity to address the global issues and work together the practical solution. Talking about the culture of solidarity, we need to allow our unique strengths to complement our collective action, such as what we have today. We share our best practices and share our actions together in this dialogue. Dear Excellencies, dear youth advocates, and also youth partners, our advocacy as young people should not be stopped here. We should repeat and echo our advocacy with concrete actions at local, national, and also regional level, and also to the global level until it is heard, until we break the silos. And we need to include those who are left further behind. For example, if we have the opportunity to attend this dialogue today, we need to share the outcome to the rest of the young people out there for them to know the importance input or output from this session. Our sustainability and also our sustainable and resilient future starts from every single action that we have today. Thank you to all stakeholders who partner with youth, with young people. Your trust are very meaningful for us, and it can enable us to explore more opportunity to revisit the existing policies that we have today, which might need positive changes to be more gender, age, and also youth sensitive for the better impact. And you enable us to lead as a global citizen. Let's continue the conversation that we have today with practical solution based on the SDG guideline, and the partnership that we have with the region, for the region, by the region are important. We can do something better together. Thank you. Back to you, Rahul.
Thank you. One of the things that stands out from your speech is that one is action, and the other one is we need to talk about. I think youths can do a lot in terms of solving this, helping in solving or carrying out these adaptations in terms of climate impacts. But one thing important is what you have mentioned is a youth investment. I think a little investment in terms of youth movement will be very helpful, because there are so many youths that can really make impact. But when it comes to little support or tapping their shoulders for their hard work, I think we need to give a little bit of investment and recognition. And the second thing that I like more about your speech was sharing ideas, sharing practical solutions. Sometimes what happens, we youths in different regions, we try to use our own method, and in thinking trying to run it in terms of trial and error and see whether it works or not. But in different countries there are certain methods that have already worked, so it would be more ideally good to try to adapt that method and try to modify it and try to implement in your region, rather than wasting your time and energy and effort in that. Having said that, on that, the second thing you have, the third thing that you have mentioned about is inclusion. I think that's one of the things that we always need to consider, so that we are able to keep, gender balance as well in terms of carrying out our work when it comes to youth involvement. So thank you very much for those kind words. Now we'd like to move on to the next speaker, who is Ms. Ashwarya Machen, and she is the conveyor of the Next Generation Fellow and the Young Thinkers track of our common agenda. I think last year, if people would remember, the UN had their 75 year anniversary, and within that, in their General Assembly, what they came out was that they mandated something that is known as our common agenda, and it was presented in September 20. I mean, it will be presented in September 2021. So I think it says General Assembly that they tried to identify solutions to biggest challenges facing the next and the future generation. So I would like to hear from Asharia is that, I mean, Asharia is coordinating this, and something that we'd like to hear from Asharia is that she can tell what progress they have made and what are some of the key reflections they have made, and what are some of the plans in which they can engage young people.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, thank you so much, everyone, for having me. It's a pleasure to be here speaking to you all. So I'm really here on behalf of 8 Next Generation Fellows, and we were nominated by kind of organisations who are very prominent in the field of youth empowerment. So that's the Office of the Secretary General's Envoy on Youth, BRAC, Restless Development, Girl Up, and I myself am a liaison at the UN Foundation. So we've kind of been tasked with bringing together young people from across the world to explore their priorities and kind of gather solutions to the biggest challenges facing the next generation. So that's the roughly half of the world population under the age of 30 today, and the future generation. So that's maybe 10.9 billion people who are likely to be born in the next century. So far we've produced a challenge paper and a big brainstorm, and we also helped to coordinate an event called the Big Brainstorm, which was really an open invitation for young thinkers and activists to contribute their ideas and pitch what they thought would be kind of really concrete and actionable solutions. And I can share both of those in the chat in a second. But also, I think before I go on, this group is not this is not the Next Generation Fellows are not a closed group. We're very open to opportunities to collaborate, and indeed, with the help of some people from the UNMGCY UNEP group, we have actually managed to pull together a youth partners group who are really looking forward to working more with in the future. I think kind of 2 key reflections that we've really picked up on as we've been speaking to young people. And the first, I think, will definitely echo a lot of what other people have been saying today, is that young people, it's very important to create spaces for young people, but really they have to be embedded and intrinsic to decision-making at all, in all topics. And that really means actually facilitating dialogues intergenerationally between young people and decision makers who are established and actually have the influence to create change. And I think the second thing is obviously creating representation for young people is important, but really there is no alternative or no excuse for actually funding and investing in young people, making sure they have the fundamental skills of education, of being able to read and write, the fundamental labor skills that they need to cope in a rapidly evolving labor market, and the kind of know-how and capacity to actually become active citizens in their community. Because really, they won't be able to be active leaders if they haven't got all of this basic kind of support, and we do really need to nurture them. As I said, as young people, we are half of the world's population already, and that number is only going to be growing. So it's really just investing in young people for everybody's future. So I think, as I said, this process is certainly not a closed door. We're very open to opportunities to collaborate. So if you would like to get in touch with me, I will share my email in the chat. We're very open to kind of offering digital consultations for your networks, for offering for kind of facilitating dialogues between your groups and the Next Generation Fellows, who are always kind of keen to hear your expertise and experiences. And the final thing to say is that we've actually just had confirmation that the Deputy Secretary General is willing to sit down for a dialogue with us on the 4th of June. So we'll be sharing more information about that soon. But I think that will really be an opportunity to come together in solidarity and present the kind of priorities for next and future generations in a setting in which really the highest level of policymakers are listening. So we'd love to have you at that event. But yeah, as I said, I will share both the reports and my email in the chat. I'd love to hear from all of you.
Thank you for your comprehensive words. But one thing that I always acknowledge that you have mentioned is like creating a space for youths, so that they always can come and feel comfortable, and whenever they will feel comfortable, then they will be able to speak out, or they will be able to voice out what problems they are actually facing, and maybe they will also suggest some of the ways of solving it. So I think that's very important. I think whenever a space is given, I think it would be good for the youth to always consider to voice up, and and always let the world know that this is the problem that we are facing, and this is what we need to do, so that the youth that exists today will benefit, and also the next generation that will come will also benefit from those actions. So thank you for those wonderful words and thoughts. Let's move on with the next speaker. So next we have Dr. Georgina Riva. She is the Regional Coordinator, Asia and the Pacific of Environment Law and Governance for the United Nations Environment Program. We want to know from, so what we'll hear from this speaker is, how has the 1972 Stockholm Declaration influenced environmental governance and environmental laws? And what is the significance of this for youths, and who wants to be involved to educate their environmental rights?
Thank you very much, Rahul. And what an incredible panel. I have to start with that. I mean, I am honored to be here to learn from you guys and to listen to you. Thank you for inviting me to this space for that. So I'm going to start speaking a little bit to Stockholm+50 by starting with the Stockholm Declaration, and then of course touching upon youth engagement and what this means. As Rahul mentioned, I'm the Regional Coordinator for Environmental Law and Governance for the United Nations Environment Program. And in this role, I support member states as well as other stakeholders to advance environmental rule of law and achieve good environmental governance. And essentially, these two concepts are interlinked and complementary. Typically, good environmental governance requires a process where institutions conduct their environmental mandate in a manner that's consistent with and promotes the rule of law and the realization of human rights in the environmental decision-making process. The environmental rule of law requires that the great implementation of a gender-responsive and rights-based approach to environmental decision-making. And I heard those messages come out already through some of the interventions. It's so important that in order to increase the influence and scale up the actions that are needed in the coming decades, there must be a rights-based approach to environmental decision-making and decision-making in general. And of course, the 1972 Stockholm Declaration is seen as the foundation of modern environmental law. In it establishes a range of principles. And along with those principles enshrined in the 1992 Rio Declaration, these are fundamental for good environmental governance. I mean, for example, procedural rights, such as rights to participation, access to information, free, prior, and informed consent, and freedom of expression. Again, all of these elements that have been spoken to by many of the interventions already. And these adequate procedural rights are essential to promote, protect, and respect substantive rights. So like rights to land, to access natural resources, the rights to a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment, the rights to education, the rights to ensure that individuals have access to basic services, particularly for persons and groups in vulnerable situations, such as and including children. Fundamentally, good environmental governance is bolstered by environmental rule of law, and it ensures that decision-making is consultative and representative, and including children and youth, and it gives these diverse stakeholders a sense of ownership, and thereby provides environmental policies with more legitimacy. We've also heard speakers talk about whole of society approach, and good environmental governance requires a whole of society and whole of government approach. So then how do children and youth engage with environmental governance and law, and how and why do we need to ensure that this is possible? Why is it so important? We all here know why it's so important. The climate and environmental crisis that we're living through, it undermines the fundamental rights of every child in so many ways. The climate emergency, air pollution, lack of access to safe and sufficient water, the rapid decline of biodiversity, all of these things undermine the rights of children, and they undermine them in ways that is unequal. We then have COVID-19 pandemic, which is exacerbating those inequalities. And again, speakers mentioned this already. The pandemic highlights that the failure to take into account the global environmental crisis continues to threaten children's rights. Life, health, food, water, culture, we can go on and on. We know that children are more susceptible than adults to forms of environmental harm. And in Southeast Asia, which is a part of the world that is one of the most disaster-affected regions, almost a quarter of the population is under 14 and more than 40% under 24. And again, just the last speaker spoke about the responsibility we have to not only think about today's youth, but to think about the future generations as well, and the unequal and compounding impacts that these issues are going to have on those that are not yet born. So for children and youth, environmental rule of law must ensure that they are not only treated fairly and equally, that they're given special protection because of greater vulnerabilities. Environmental rule of law can provide the basis to ensure that youth are given space at the table. This essential space that, again, someone talked about agency, and making sure that we give youth agency to be leaders, not just to participate. Environmental rule of law also provides that enabling condition for children and youth to realize that important sentiment that's being put forward by the UNEP major group of children and youth: nothing about us without us. And we need to have those procedural rights in place to ensure that we can realize that sentiment. So rule of law is critical, I think I've sort of emphasized this, for the protection of the environment and the promotion of rights for children and youth and future generations to live in a healthy environment. And so what can UNEP do to support this? And one way is through the promotion and protection of children's rights to a safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment. And we have working closely with other UN partners, UN Human Rights and UNICEF, to develop policy guidance for promoting and protecting these rights. But we're not doing this, of course, alone. As I said, it's fundamental that children and youth are equally participating in the development of such documents and policies. And so we have worked very closely with children and youth experts. We've got the UNEP Major Group of Children and Youth, the UN Major Group on Children and Youth, the Children Environmental Rights Initiative, the ASEAN Youth Organization, the Asia Pacific Youth Caucus, all participating in inclusive multi-stakeholder processes. And seeing youth as leading this process and as informing how the adults in the room need to address these issues and draft policy to respond. We're going to be launching these principles and policy guidance this year, and we're looking forward to continuing partnerships to see how do we then take this to the action, making sure that we indeed walk the talk and implement. Of course, all of you participating in this forum are among the children and youth that are already driving change, voicing expectations that governments take action to ensure the safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment that is needed for your future, for the future of all of us. And Stockholm+50, for me, is an important time to evaluate how the principles enshrined within are being upheld, to reflect upon the fundamental importance of these principles in informing contemporary environmental law, and also their continued relevance, because indeed I think that they do continue to be relevant in promoting that safe, clean, healthy, and sustainable environment for all of us. So thank you very much again for this opportunity, and I'm looking forward to continuing to learn and listen.
Thank you, Dr. Anya, and you have highlighted a lot of things. But what we have seen is like what we are seeing is that there are a lot of crises that are happening. That stood up a lot is climate change, and what COVID has done is added icing into the cake. So there are a lot of problems, and all these problems bring a lot of inequalities, and most of the individuals, their rights are not met. Some of them are running out of food, some are running out of basic healthcare system, and I think that's where this good environmental governance kicks in, and tries to mandate most of the things so that all the individuals in any crisis they are able to meet their basic rights. So thank you for those kind words. And now we would like to have, someone without whom this session would have been possible. And we would like to call Kuntu Medali from the Stockholm Environmental Institute to share what she would like to reflect what from the panelists that they have shared their ideas, and uh, and what are the ways in which that they would further assist in engaging in the lead up to this Stockholm plus 50 outcomes.
Thank you very much. Thank you for the amazing session. I just want to say that I feel very humble and honored to be part of this session. I've heard so many amazing and inspiring youth. I just discussed with my friend. I was like, I wish I have this kind of spirit when we were young, and it's looking at how these young people having so many visionary and amazing spirit. It's kind of like, your fate on humanity, and that the future will be, it looks like it's going to be okay if like it's in your hands. It looks really good. So just a brief introduction again. So my name is Kuntu Melati, and I'm a research associate from Stockholm Environment Institute under the policy cluster. And I'm focusing on sustainable development goals for SEI Asia. We are based in Bangkok here. And also just a simple fun fact for those who don't know about SEI, or Stockholm Environment Institute. We are founded in 1989, and actually we are named after the Stockholm Declaration of 1972. And we look at this declaration as the origin of our mandate to fulfill it through research and engagement in the policy processes. So Stockholm plus 50 is a very big thing for us, and we surely will have a bigger contribution there. To explain about SEI briefly, SEI focuses on environmental dimension of human development and well-being. And in building and drawing on key policy declaration, we are focusing on three major sectors or area. One is on reduce climate risk. So disaster risk and reduction is a big part of it, of course. Second, on how to build a more greener and sustainable future. So that's through sustainable consumption and production, and also circular economy, as well as resilient ecosystems. So as you mentioned, the biodiversity. Also, the third one is on improved health and well-being. We have a huge project on air pollution and also on promoting sustainable food system. And we promote and prioritize research to impact through co-created knowledge, and apply this through tools, workshops, scientific publication, and also conference, as we have now here in one of the examples. So we aim to influence policy to changing agenda, enhancing capacities, and improve decision-making in different spheres of governance. Related to the youth, we believe that engagement of young people is very vital for addressing current and future environmental challenge. We have so many framework from the previous panelists mentioned about the United Nations 2030 agenda for sustainable development. And also we have Paris Agreement, Sendai framework, and all of these are trying to address the challenge that we have. But I think one question still remains, and that is how we better support the young people to get involved. And as you precisely described, not only involved as a participant, but also as the change itself, and how to, allow this creating a pathways for them to take ownership of their future. And to this, we believe that youth are the future, and that's like undebatable for sure, that we believe that our role here is actually to listen and to take account of youth aspiration, not the other way around. We're not supposed to telling you what to do. This is like, because you are the one who the custodian itself. And we believe that we need that aspiration, your voices, your concern need to be integrated in any activities that address the climate emergencies. And we should utilize all the platform that we can provide it, such as Stockholm+50 for sure, to make sure that this has happened. Unfortunately, we know that a lot of decision-making processes disregard the concern of young people and fails to recognize the capacity that the young people have to contribute to their own resilience. And for this, SEI itself, we are committed for what we called as inclusive resilience. And that means we include different groups in climate change adaptation policies, different groups such as indigenous people, marginalized people, young people, and NGOs. So we include them in the adaptation policies in our program implementation, and we also make sure that there's an enabling environment for this group to make meaningful contribution. Recently, actually, we published an op-ed on how young climate highlighting on how young climate activists and also young scientists have been warning us for years that humanity is consuming and abusing nature beyond its limits. And our children and young people have been making their voices heard until the pandemic happened. And this is already highlighted also by the previous speaker. We've learned that the global pandemic has actually shifted everyone's attention, and unfortunately, it silenced much of the youth-led activities and also campaign that actually took momentum on the previous COP. And then, although many young climate activists still remain engaged, but as we did our analysis in social media, the number has plunged up into 70% compared before the pandemic. So this is the importance of how to tackle the climate crisis and recovering from COVID-19. We do need a systematic approach, a full approach of requires that all society to be on board on this. We do need that, we do believe that we need to build back better, but in doing so sustainably, we need to place social justice and also gender equality in the front of our work. And in engaging with youth, we also leverage our boundaries partner, including the UN Major Group for Children and Youth, and also Asia Pacific Development Center and Disability. We had a session on the 7th Asia Pacific Climate Change Adaptation to make sure that their voices, and then make sure that all these partners that are sidelined in a climate negotiation are included in the process. And also, just to also quote from yesterday's session, which I found it very inspiring as well. We aware that awareness is a never-ending process, that the importance of education and creating pathways to move forward is very crucial, and we need to listen to the youth voice and start investing in them. It means like investing through education to vocational training and creating more green job and also providing skill for development. So for Stockholm+50 itself, we aim to continue to work with youth on evidence-based research for policy impact, not only on a DRR aspect, but as I mentioned, also on circular economy, sustainable consumption and production, on food system, and of course on nature-based solutions, and also promoting right-based approach, gender equity, and as well as social inclusion in all of our works. SEI welcomes any opportunity to collaborate with children and youth-led organization on the ground and other stakeholder and policies makers to have a concrete joint action for the upcoming conference. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you very much, Khantum. I really extremely hope that SCI keep on supporting youth research dialogues and youth engagements overall, so that this sort of events and forums keep on continue, because we need to make the interventions till we get the results. Thank you very much. So we have very limited time and the closing session of the forum has already started. So without any other further delay, I'd like to call upon the project fellow. He is Jo Hotit Ong. He is a passionate young engineer in resolving climate change and global warming issues through technological innovation. He hopes to sustain economic growth through STEM education while preserving environmental sustainability. Please welcome Jo for the project presentation outcome. Are you there with us, Jo?
Okay, can you hear me? Am I audible?
Yeah,
I'm
okay,
sorry
yeah.
for my connection. Okay,
Yeah.
I will share my screen and I will keep it short, all right? Because of the clock is ticking. Okay, all right. My name is Zoto Aung from Myanmar, and I'm one of the young fellows in this Asia Pacific researchers, practitioners, and policymakers in dialogue with children and youth project. And we are conducting research through the focal discussion, as well as the informers, and also the policy review. And here are some of the data collection and the research methodology. You know, the data were collected both online and offline, and the majority of the respondents are from the age below 30, which are the 96% of the total respondents, and the 3.3% of the respondents were between 30 and 40. And this study that we conducted also bring to have the person with disability to record a diverse responses, and more than 24.2% of the respondents are from the indigenous people in this in their home countries. Because as you know, the Southeast Asia, actually I'm from Myanmar, that's why I'm having access to the slow internet. And Southeast Asia is particularly prone to the disasters due to its location. But in the policy review, in the policy, it's that the region has prioritized in developing national and regional disaster management capacity, you know, to respond to the disaster. Myanmar is not the country that I'm living in. Also mentioned to integrate the climate change consideration into the further, you know, policy formulations such as health policy, like energy policy, and also the education policy. And some of the surprising facts of the total analysis are that Myanmar particularly is low to the level of knowledge and disaster and climate change, and it's also very extremely low in the preparedness compared to China. And the other three Southeast Asian countries like Malaysia, Myanmar, and Philippines are also low in when it comes to the preparedness. And surprisingly, Myanmar and the Malaysia are very high in when it comes to the youth perception on the DRR policy. And the analysis indicates that there's a lot of awareness and understanding among common people and in the DR related policy. And the government, the other agencies should also, you know, take initiative, you know, for people-centered approaches. But one more interesting thing is in my country in Myanmar, the young people are usually brought on board as the beneficiaries, not as the implementation partner. And yeah, that's it. And this policy program really teach me like hands-on experiences on the data analysis and the policy review, and also wider understanding of my own community that I'm living in. And in the February 1st, a couple of months ago, you might probably heard of, there was a serious political crisis in my country, and I have to overcome a lot of challenges when I'm conducting the workforce video for interview, data collection, and also interviewing with the key informers in interview. And I would like to, there's also internet cut down in my country that's why I have to travel to places to get access to this slow internet over VPN. And yeah, that's it. And I would like to work with you all, to engage in the policy process actions of the climate change when the situation of the country becomes stable again. And it's very nice to meet you all. And I will be finishing up my presentation due to the time limitation. Okay, thank you very much all.
Thank you, Joe, for your brief presentation about the project. Now, without any delay, I'd like to call Ms. Yugratna Srivastava. She is Global Focal Point of Children and Youth Major Group, to give remarks and synthesis from her side.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rubina. I'll be rather quick, and many solidarity to Joe, to you and people in your community in Myanmar and what is happening. And we are so glad that you were able to join us in this discussion. It is, it's just, one of the several challenges that young people and youth communities are facing, whether that's peace and security, or whether that is environmental and human rights. So I just wanted to make a very short comment towards the end. And, we have heard from a range of diverse voices here, and I'm sure it will inform the work and the youth engagement that we are planning in the lead up to Stockholm+50, both for the major group, but also for our colleagues from Stockholm+50 Secretariat that hear all the rich inputs that we have heard. Just speaking really what I think, there are clearly many actors when it comes to multilateralism space and youth, whether those are youth actors and whether those are UN actors. And one of the focuses that we have had while preparing a roadmap on what youth engagement could look like for Stockholm+50 is how do we bring key groups together in a way that is fit for purpose. By being fit for purpose, it means being fit thematically to Stockholm+50 on what their priorities are, but at the same time being fit procedurally, that looking at what are the milestones from now until June 2022, next year, that will feed into these events. Sahar highlighted the Conference of Youth. Before Climate Change COP, there will be Desertification Youth Forum. Before the CD COP, we are having Food Summit Youth Engagement Mobilization. We heard from Aish, who was talking about a youth dialogue with Amina Mohammed taking place next month. So these are really key milestones and key groups that are mobilizing engagement of youth in these different sectors. So how do we sort of, bring them together? I also want to highlight, there has been discussion about ending silos. Ending silos, of course, is super important to have this coherence. But at the same time, we must remember that siloed engagement or bridging siloed engagement means that we bring in people and we meet youth constituencies, movements, and structures where they are at. Silos bringing people together should not be a form of power grab. It should not be a form of that, okay, now different youth groups are together and then, a particular youth group that has more resource or individuals that have more resource are then, controlling or running all of those youth groups together. So when we bring things into silos, and I say this as a woman from South, especially for young people from Asia Pacific, they have to be supported. And that lies upon, the conveners of the process, that lies upon the supporters of the process to make sure that young people have those capacities to be supported and represented in the systems that we will have in the lead up to Stockholm+50. I also want to highlight the great work that has been done by the DRR Youth Constituency, Anish, Rubina, Jacqueline, and their colleagues in coordinating this youth forum and also supporting with this session. And we have had a regional youth forum on DRR, and I would like to call upon the UNEP Asia Pacific office and partners here in Asia to support a regional youth environment assembly this year for Asia Pacific in the lead up to Stockholm+50 and UNEA 5.2 in a much similar format that we had this regional youth forum on DRR, and building on the global youth environment assembly we had in February 2020, one in the lead up to UNEA 5.1. And we would like to see how some of the voices of young people from Pacific can be highlighted and at the same time Asian region in all its diversity. I also want to conclude by saying that it's not going to be an easy road, and especially we don't know how future of next 1 year looks like, and we're discussing future of multilateralism, because the kind of shocks and stresses we have had because of COVID-19 pandemic, and then the cascading effect thereafter of that, it makes youth engagement a bit challenging, but at the same time it makes or gives a space for it being us to be able to innovate in many ways. So how do we transcend that meaningful youth engagement, meaningful youth leadership, but at the same time bring all of those actors together? And we are very grateful for the leadership that Sweden has shown in listening to young people, and also providing this a space where self-organized groups are coming together. And we are looking forward to seeing how we can have a structured youth engagement. We do have some ideas that have been discussed, and we are working on them, and we hope to update you soon. And you can be assured that it would be designed in a way that brings all the relevant actors together and provides a space for all of you to contribute, whatever that structure would be. And we hope to update you on that soon enough. Thank you very much, Rubina.
Okay, thank you everyone. Thank you, Yugratna, for your remarks, and thank you everyone for joining in today. Now we are at the very end of this session, and I have just posted the link of the closing session that we are having right now. You can just join to that link. Thank you again for joining us here today. See you in closing session.